Hello again. Um, so we are introducing the topic of surfaces in playgrounds, and that's a hard one. Well, it should be soft, but sometimes it's really hard. Right? Surfaces, well, surfaces could be many things, but we are specifically talking about impact attenuation surfacing. That's what we are worried about. And I've heard someone calling landing surfaces. You have talked about landing surfaces. So what we talk about in the standard, it's impact attenuating surfaces. And as we saw yesterday, the standard only mentions impact attenuation as requirements, and also in general, the material, the toxicity of materials, okay? So for the performance of the impact attenuation, it's, of course, oh, there's nothing there, but I'm seeing a movie here, but, okay. So the thing is, we have requirements in the standard, and these requirements are, as I told you yesterday, we have a new concept in this new standard. Until now, the only way to measure if it was okay, we had to determine the critical fall height. And that was a problem. The critical fall height is the property of the material up to a certain maximum height, free fall height. Okay, that was what was in the previous standard, and also how you, I can show the faces also because these are my friends' kids, and I'm authorized, okay? And this was like 2 weeks ago. So I thank them because it was not on purpose. So, back to impact attenuation, this new concept, adequate level of impact attenuation, okay? We have now 3 ways of measuring that in the standard, gives us 3 ways. One, if you can compare to a table 4, which is a table that gives you some examples on, especially for natural materials. So when can you have grass or turf or soil up to 1 meter? Or if you have gravel or sand, what are the specific features you should look for and the depth? You can have bark or wood chips, and also it gives you some example sizes and the depth. But these are only examples. It doesn't mean that you can only use, because sometimes you have sand or pebbles that are bigger, or if the wood chips are bigger. So these are examples of materials you can use, and without testing, you can have them in the playground, okay? Examples. It's not excluding any material. Then if you have prefabricated ones, then these can be certified on a lab. And that's useful because then you know that a specific depth will correspond to a specific height. So that can be useful. But if you build it on site, wet pour on site, you have to know the specifications, but it will vary a lot depending on who is installing it, the temperature, the humidity in the, the humidity, yes, in the air at the time of installation, the time it takes to dry out. And you will only know the exact performance of it if you test it afterwards. Okay? So what I want to say is that, first of all, the standard does not forbid any materials. You can make experiences. For instance, in Portugal, we have made some experiences with cork, but then cork would fly away. So now we're trying to combine cork with other materials, okay? So it doesn't forbid. And if it's not in the table, you may need testing, so you cannot compare. And if it's synthetic, you have to test. But this is what the standard tells us. But there are many, many, many other criteria, and much more important criteria, that you should take into account when you're choosing the type of material. Not only how it integrates to the environment that you have, but most of all, and we are talking about children, the play value, the how versatile it is. In this big playground, you see, you can be now used for all ages, and it becomes much more inclusive because you have this type of surface. Okay, so any child can play there. And if there is an older child playing on top of this, he will not jump onto the small child. They will regulate. So it's great. You can have this much more valuable play material, really. And it's an impact surfacing, okay? Of course, there are other criteria that are important, like initial costs, maintenance costs, resources for maintenance, inclusion. And for inclusion, it's very interesting, because this type of material, for instance, is not very good for wheels. But as we said yesterday, very few children will be on wheels, on wheelchairs, for instance. And if they are, they would love to get out, and they could play here also. So if it's not accessible for wheels, and also of the carers, for instance, a parent in a wheelchair or something, it's not very accessible. But how much do you want a wheelchair to go underneath and to be an obstacle under here? Or if you keep all your things there? So in this report I mentioned yesterday about inclusion, playground accessible for all, we also have this idea that the surfaces can help us aid access or restrict access. So there are so many features that really, when you are choosing a surfacing, you have to know what is exactly what we want to achieve with this surface. Another issue is also that it is very questionable. Some people question, especially for small fall heights, if you really need impact attenuation, because when it looks soft, it will also encourage bigger jumps or children taking bigger risks. So it is very important that if you really provide a surface, that it's not misleading, that it really will have some attenuation effect. Because then if you, for instance, you have like 10 centimeters of sand, and the children think it's much deeper, like on the beach, he can take a decision based on a false perception of what's happening. So if you provide loose fill, it really has to be loose fill. It's better not to have anything, but then it will not be certified, of course, but because of the standard. But for safety of the children, it's better not to have anything, and they know what they can count on, than to have something that induces them in dangerous behavior. That is not really free choice, okay? So I wouldn't like to go much further on this, because there are so many criteria, and I think it would be much more interesting if we can also maybe see the other presentation on the synthetic materials, because I think it's better that then we have questions related to your situation here. I just would like to add that also all materials have advantages and disadvantages and possibilities for molding, for landscaping. And as I said, nothing is forbidden, but in some cases you will have a test to confirm that it's okay. Okay? So we can talk later about advantages and disadvantages for each type of material.
Okay, thank you.